Go for it.
Hey Kim, so lovely to speak to you today. And we've been waiting for this recording for quite some time right now. But before we start with our topic, would you mind sharing your story? Who are you? What's your background? Give us some details.
Can do. So my name is Kim Seknan. I have been in contact centers pretty much all my life, it feels like. Started in contact center when I was 22. I'm now 38, so 16 years. Um, been a resource planner and a WFM manager for the best part of 4 or 5 years. Done a bit of real time. Worked all through Scandinavia. So I was recruited in to have an in-house massive center that covers entire Europe for teleperformance. We did WFM management across the entire sector, basically around 3 to 5,000 FTE. Good fun. Learned how to scale that end. Did then a bit of in-house. Nowadays, I work in a very small contact center for about 250 FTE, and I cover the utility sector with water. So I've kind of been everywhere, and I came down to the UK because of my wife. We met in Sweden, and at the time we didn't really know what to make of it, and we just was meant to be. Step by step, we met each other. I have a great story actually on this one. I'll share that with you later. But we met 2 times in Sweden. First time on accident. Second time was kind of on purpose on her end and not on mine. So I don't know, she hunted me down, I guess. I don't know if that's good to say. Uh,
Love it.
but we ended up anyhow. Long story short, we ended up now 5 years later married, and I live in the UK together with her because she's from the UK and I'm from Norway.
This is amazing story, and I'm sure that my husband is gonna say exactly the same thing. It was her, she hunted me down, and this is how we ended up here right now. So I think you guys can relate on this topic.
Yeah, we can.
But great to hear your story. And one thing that really captured my attention on our previous chat, which sadly it was non-recorded, but I'm gonna bring you back to what we talked about last time. And
Sure.
you mentioned one sentence to me, and it was, planners don't really know how to sell themselves. And I find that so relatable. And I made that mistake so many times for so many years throughout my career, thinking, okay, you know what? I'm gonna work myself, like I'm gonna bury myself with work. I'm gonna work overtime. I'm not gonna have a free minute, and everybody is gonna cheer me and come and say, "Okay, you're doing so much." And I ended up not actually having the time to communicate what I'm doing, and nobody else knew exactly how much work I'm doing. So this is why I'm so fascinated that you brought that up. And in our profession, we're always talking about being underappreciated, or how do we look for promotion? How do we look for a different role? And I think the starting point is how to communicate what exactly planners are doing, or WFMers in general, and how do we make sure we capture senior stakeholders' attention.
And I agree with that. And there's a lot on this subject, and I'm excited about this subject because I've made myself the mistake over the years. And I just to set the scene, have you ever Googled selling something or to sell yourself?
I must admit, I have not.
So it's an interesting one. So when you Google it, it's actually kind of cool. So if you Google the word selling, the
Mhm.
immediate returns are one, to sell something for currency, so money or goods. That's not really relatable to us. But the
Mhm.
second one, which is the focus area for me, there was to yeah, I can't say the word, persuade someone of the merits of something. And the merits of our work is impossible to explain and to a single individual because it has some merit everywhere, but it does.
Mhm.
But nobody can really define what that everywhere means, and that's why it's so relatable to anybody. Because if you do 20,000 things, how do you point at one thing that was good?
I so agree with you on this one. And You know what? Thinking back for the start of my career and that mistake that you mentioned as well, I remember I was sitting down to one once and I was expecting that my manager is going to give me a promotion because I was doing five things that
Yeah.
was not even in my contract. And she ended up saying, you know, I'm not really sure what you're doing. And I was like, what do you mean? And it's so important to actually, as you mentioned, sell the merit of your
Mm.
work and sell the value or actually prove the value. And I feel the value is different for different stakeholders. So for your contact center manager,
Mm.
it's going to be one thing. For your agent, it's going to be completely different. But you need to
Yeah.
be able to speak with these different audiences.
Agreed. And I find I tried to do some research in front of this because I wanted to see if I could actually pinpoint it. So
Mhm.
I have a couple of points on this, but I agree with you 100%. When you look at stakeholders, I mean, looking at my little world of the corner of the world, and I'm in the water industry, which isn't the largest in terms of contact center scale, but I do remember the back then as well. But if I think about it, I got HR, I got training, I got my senior management team that is looking for it, I got finance, I got recruitment, I got HR. Did I say HR? Yeah, I got the what's it called? The contract policy holders structure because you need to be able to talk to different. You got data protection people because you need typically host a lot of agent information like names, tech, gender, blah blah. Um, I think that's just on the top of my head. And if you think about it, you have to wear a different hat for each one.
Absolutely. So, what would be your tips? How do we start selling ourselves better in that matter?
Well, I have something I'm going to share with you, and
Oh,
I've done a bit of research on this, and I've done this with my team actually. So to set the scene, last year I told my team, "Who are you?" I tried to explain it in a different scale. So, and they couldn't answer me next question. They told me a lot about what they did, but they never told me who they were. And that to me was very interesting because they couldn't just say it outright. And then I was like, okay, I need some help from training. And what we did, we went to Insights and Discovery to find out what kind of personality types we were. And the personality types comes back in color grading. So I don't know if you can see this paper, but this is mine.
okay.
So you will see there's red, yellow, it's a bit unclear, but red, yellow, green, and blue. And what we find is that when you do this kind of test, I asked them when we were doing the test, the researchers, what our field does. Well, about 80% of the people working in our field are heavily blue. Now, blue is analytical. We are very analytical people. We have about 10% that's heavy into red, and 10%, sorry, 5% into the green, and ironically, very low into the yellow.
The social part?
The social part. And that is the thing that started to understand that when I asked them about what about sales then? What do they score? Almost the direct opposite. So that was the first step for me to starting to understand that okay, we are extremely analytical, driven, energetic people, which is the red and blue in us. But
Mhm.
when it comes to doing something that are very business focused. So, for example, we go in and I can take an example today. I was sitting in a massive meeting with senior leaders inside our business. We were building up a wish list for the 10 most important technical drivers for the next half year. So our CTO went out and say, "Give me your top 10. I need to work on those." So now I'm sitting there with stakeholders from all around the business, and I'm having to sell my part to get my part moved forward. And you get challenged from everywhere. Analytically, I can explain to you for days how it works, but there's a bit of that person behind the scene, behind it as well, and you have to kind of sell that person in. And one of my team members, for example, that's very heavy on the red side, she is very scared of sitting in leading a meeting because she's worried about saying the wrong thing.
Okay.
And then I went to. I have one person on my team, which actually is the opposite profile, and he just stumbled kind of into my team somehow, and he is very green, and he leads meetings for days. He has no issues with it, and that's kind of setting the scene a bit for me. So if you're wondering, like, why is this? I think this is step one that I found. I have a couple more, but I don't know if you want to ask different questions before we get to them.
Oh, you can go ahead because I'm so fascinated about your discovery, so I want to learn more right now.
Okay, fair enough. Uh, so number two is my boss asked me basically how important is this thing. So I was basically doing a bit of forecasting and forecasting in for the next 5 years, and the business has a plan to say that we need to keep a 5 year forecast, and it's up to my team to deliver that forecast for most of the contact center and generally customer focused areas. I host that, and I was spending better part of half a day on this on Tuesday, and he came out to me, and the first thing he asked me was, "Well, can you do something different?" Because he was in traveling, he was rushed, he had to get some data immediately, and he asked me, "Oh, well, that can just wait. It's not that important, is it?" And I was thinking to myself, well, this is a regulatory compliance thing that we need to have, and I have a deadline that comes in on Wednesday tomorrow. But your perception of what I'm doing is that that's not that important,
Mhm.
and that it's to me, I just kind of you manage up, don't you? So I told my leader that look, you can ask someone else. I'm gonna have to get this done by deadline. If I don't get this in, you will see a financial penalty. And obviously he stopped asking because any financial penalty he stops. But then I realized that what if this is constantly the message we get everywhere? It's not that important. Can you just do this? Can you just jump on this? Can you just and when you look at how do we manage today, most of our teams manage through inboxes. We get constantly like messages from all over the contact center. Can we do this? Can we jump this? Can we move this? And it's all equally important. So how do we prioritize what's important, and how do we dig through all of this mess to say to our senior leaders, this is the issue you're having. You need to sort this out. And not only that, but am I the one to say that? Am I important enough to say that? Because I just deal with this little corner of the world. This is just kind of my bit. You have all of this stuff. So my perceived importance is very small until you understand how to convert it into pounds, pennies, move it into a currency and language they understand.
This is the key lesson for me here because again, I have done the mistake so many times being set in a senior managers meeting and explaining, oh, our service level is going to be that and our abundance is going to be that. And the thing I learned is that nobody cares.
Yeah.
That's my job. It's my job to understand what would be the impact on our metrics. What they care about is what does that mean for the business from financial perspective? How many people means a certain cost. It means money. It's that simple. And senior managers have so much responsibility. They need to drive the whole vehicle.
Hmm.
And they need to be responsible for so many different parts that we, from as you said, our little corner are not seeing. But the one thing that they need to be aware of at all times is what's the impact on our performance directly on the business? What's the impact on the employees? And what can we do cost-wise? And we need to learn how to navigate through that conversation. And I feel that a lot of us planners are not really taught or directed or manage how to lead those conversations. So we end up communicating what we're comfortable with. And
Hmm.
what we're comfortable with is, oh, we have that many people, the service levels, and this and that. Okay, nobody cares on these meetings. Nobody cares. And that's so important to come across as a message.
Agree 100%. And this is for me, this is the fun part. We speak in terms of KPIs. They
Mm-hmm.
speak in terms of emotion.
Mm-hmm.
You need to balance the gap between those two.
Yes.
And it's very, very difficult to do when, again, coming back to the personalities, if you're mostly analytical, because this is not your first instinct is to convert it into something different. But the frustration is definitely there. So if you don't get the message across, or they don't see the importance of what you're saying, I've noticed it on my team. They can get frustrated. I've had very, very strong conversation with my planners where they go, but why are they not understanding this? I'm telling them, I'm pointing it out, I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking to myself, well, how did you say it?
Mhm.
That is the first key element to me. What was the words you used? How did you set the scene for them? And then I was trying to kind of navigate it, and I realized that the key bit for me wasn't to tell them how and what and where and all these other bits. I tried to get them to talk to me about something completely different, and I have started to change the subject. So instead of talking about KPIs, I'm talking about the weather, about how the weather is impacting the calls coming in, or what time of the month it is. What are we doing this month? Are people getting paid now? Maybe we get a bit more calls instead of looking at that analytical. We have to do that, obviously, but it changing the way of thinking slowly got them to ah finger in the air. I think it's going to be this. We go with this, guys. I think this is going to really lead to, and this has changed some of the dynamic between us and them because the language has changed. Not the fundamentals, they're still there, but the language, and that's a huge key bit.
I think we need to make entirely new recording on fundamentals because I agree with you 100%. Our lingo can be barely understood often between different parties. So we tend to speak in a way that's very clear for us because we sit behind our data. That's what drives us. And then we end up talking to that lingo to other people, and they're like, what?
Mhm.
No, okay. If I don't understand, it means that it's not important. So let's move on. And it's again so important for us to be adaptable. And if we're talking about also how to progress your career, we need to understand that data. It's very important, but it's only one small skill that you need to
Exactly.
have to progress your career.
And it's fun to me. So I've recently, actually, the same individual, the lady I talked about, I recently promoted her to a senior.
Mhm.
And the reason I did that was initially she was talking to me about all the important things she was doing. She was planning, she was moving forward, she was sorting out the agents. And to me, that didn't matter because I expected that. That
Yeah.
was kind of my expectation. That was just your day job. But they did, and she was exceeding her day job, exceptionally good planner. But she didn't understand the little itty bits in between. How how did you communicate this? Yeah, okay, and one of the things I did was that I had her on a project to write a completely brand new process that was really bugging her,
Mhm.
and getting her to write a white paper on it to understand how the rest of the business thought. And I was working with the senior HR members, and I told them that you're going to get this up and down. It's going to take a while for her to get this. So please just tell her, nah, not good enough because I need this as well. And just keep on, and I will manage her timeline on this. And the amount of frustration she had to get all of the information understood by HR, which is a completely different mindset, was so difficult for her. What we found is that we removed all KPIs. That completely disappeared. We moved over to behaviors and informational and all the other things. And that is when it clicked for her that, oh, I get it now. And that's when she was made a senior.
Wow, this is amazing approach. And we've been talking so much about what can you do as a planner to progress your career, but now this is amazing tip for managers how to support their team members and how to upskill them basically. Do you have any other tips?
She has been, patience is one, maybe. uh,
Okay, I agree with this one.
yeah. No, so taking it from my side, the journey I've been on to try and get somebody promoted, there is a lot of misunderstanding in how to do things. We have the extremely data oriented, talented people that understand data at a very deep level. We can talk for hours about the methodology around forecasting and all that stuff. but they have kind of a barrier around communication and language and other things. We have the other side of the fence, which is more my senior now, which is they're very persistent. They keep knocking that door. They try to move things forward, but they feel frustration because it feels like the people on the other end is not understanding it. You always have to have a bespoke approach, I think, is where I'm getting at. But the other side of it is that there is some things that work. Define your minimum, because there are a lot of times we do so much work. What is the minimum level of work they slash you should be doing? Expectation of them. Because I was mentioning this earlier, and it kind of touches on the thing I said. When you look at skill set, we all think skill matrix immediately when I say that. We build up a table with skills. No, don't do that. Forecasting. How good at is your person at forecasting? Doesn't matter how they do forecasting, they can find their own way of doing it. If they get it within tolerable margins, they are doing a good job. If you look at resource allocation, so when you apply resource, do they understand how to build a shift? Just if you were to redefine the world, have a project for them, have them rebuild the entire shift structure from bottom up, and throw a challenge in there. What if it was all fixed? You have no flexible shift anymore. How would you do it? If they understand these things, that means that they understand the core of what we do. And if they understand the core, then the rest can follow. But if they can't do these bits, then they're not ready yet. And that is the thing that we need to train better on and understand ourselves as managers, is that define what your minimals are. And it doesn't matter because we all work in supply and demand. So it doesn't matter if you're doing it I obviously work in a contact center, but you can apply this everywhere. You can apply this to a truck driver. You can apply this to a project manager or a project resource allocation. You can apply it anywhere, because if you know what you want out of an individual, it's easy from there.
I love these tips, and I think this is a perfect way to get away from the, oh, why are you doing stuff in a certain way? Well, we've always done it this way. So by throwing that as a challenge to your team members and asking them to basically find their own approach, it can be so powerful. So I think it's a great way to wrap up that conversation. Just maybe give the independence and the autonomy to your team members, guide them, manage them, train them, support them, but also allow them to find their own ways how the process can be better.
We have a team full of people that know how to use Google. I promise you that. So they so they will find a way. If you throw a challenge their way, they will find a way. But it's the accuracy of that way. So if it's tried and tested, I don't really care what type of forecasting you do, as long as it works.
Yeah, I love that one. Thank you, Kim, so much for that conversation. And I can't
Right?
wait to get you for a second one because you have so much stuff to say. So let's already start planning for a new one.
Yeah, absolutely.